We always think of plants as these amazing food factories, right? They soak up sunlight and boom, they make their own food. But making food is just step one. Using it, actually getting the energy out of it, well, that's a whole different story. Today, we're going to follow the energy and see how a plant actually cashes in on all that sugary goodness it works so hard to create.
All right, let's get into it. So, if photosynthesis is the factory making the fuel, how does the plant's engine actually burn that fuel? To power everything from growing taller to making flowers, the answer is a process that's not unique to plants at all. In fact, it's something you, me, and pretty much every living thing on this planet have in common.
And that process is cellular respiration. Now don't think of this like just lighting a sugar cube on fire. That's one big, messy burst of energy. No, the cell is way more sophisticated. It carefully breaks down food molecules step by step in a super controlled way, capturing little bits of energy all along the way. It's incredibly efficient. To really get a feel for this, we're going to follow the journey of a single molecule of glucose. This is the plant's main fuel, fresh from the photosynthesis factory. This one little molecule is just packed with energy, and its entire mission is to release that energy so the cell can get to work.
Okay, so the first leg of its journey is called glycolysis. It sounds fancy, but the name tells you exactly what it is. Glyco for sugar, and lysis for splitting. It's the great universal sugar split. This process is so ancient, so fundamental to life, you find it almost everywhere.
So our glucose molecule is floating around in the cytoplasm. That's kind of the main fluid-filled space of the cell. And here's a really important detail. This first step doesn't need any oxygen at all. It's completely anaerobic. It just happens oxygen or no oxygen. Now, if you look at the full biochemical roadmap, whoa, it looks pretty intense, right? It's actually a 10-step process with a bunch of different enzymes. But don't worry, you do not need to memorize this thing. We can boil it all down to just 3 main phases to understand what's really going on. So, here's the gist. First, you got to spend money to make money, right? The cell invests 2 energy molecules, called ATP, just to get the glucose prepped. Then comes the split. The 6-carbon glucose molecule gets chopped right in half. And finally, the payoff. The cell gets its investment back and then some, making 4 ATP molecules. It also charges up 2 special molecules called NADH. Just think of NADH as tiny, rechargeable batteries that have just scooped up some high-energy electrons. They'll be super important later. All right, let's do the accounting. We started with 1 glucose, we put in 2 ATP, we got 4 ATP out, so that's a net profit of 2 ATP. Not bad. We also end up with 2 molecules of something called pyruvic acid, that's what's left of our glucose, and those 2 energized NADH batteries. It's a decent start, but honestly, most of the energy is still locked up in those pyruvic acid molecules. What happens to them? That's where the real story begins.
So what's next? Well, those 2 pyruvic acid molecules have just arrived at a major fork in the road. Their entire fate, their whole journey from here, boils down to one single factor.
And that one thing is oxygen. Is it there or not? The cell's whole energy game plan depends on the answer. We're talking the difference between getting a tiny bit of energy out or a massive jackpot.
Okay, so if there's no oxygen, the cell has to go with option B, fermentation. It's a quick and dirty process, an incomplete breakdown that just stays in the cytoplasm and gives you very little energy. But if oxygen is around, then it's game on. The cell can fire up aerobic respiration, a complete, total breakdown that happens inside a special little organelle called the mitochondrion. And that unleashes a tidal wave of energy. Just how little energy are we talking about with fermentation? It's kind of shocking, actually. It unlocks less than 7% of the energy that was originally stored in that glucose molecule. It's a survival tactic for sure, but man, it leaves almost all the potential energy just sitting on the table.
Yeah, leaving 93% of the energy behind is not a great long-term strategy. Luckily for our plant cell, it's got oxygen, so that pyruvic acid gets the VIP pass to the main event, happening inside the cell's powerhouse, the mitochondrion. This is where the real energy harvest begins.
First up, the pyruvic acid dives into something called the Krebs cycle. You can kind of picture this as a molecular merry-go-round. It systematically pulls apart what's left of our glucose, and it releases carbon dioxide as a waste product. But its main job, its most important job, is to load up way more of those energy-carrying batteries, tons of NADH, and a cousin molecule called FADH2.
So now all of these fully charged batteries, all that NADH and FADH2, they travel to the inner wall of the mitochondrion. And this is where they finally cash in. They drop off their high-energy electrons at the top of a chain of proteins. It's called the electron transport system. It's like a cascade, an energy waterfall. The electrons get passed down the line from one protein to the next, and every time they're handed off, a little burst of energy is released.
So, why do we need oxygen for this? Why is it called aerobic respiration? Well, at the very, very end of that electron chain, after all the energy has been squeezed out, something has to be there to grab those used-up electrons. And that something is oxygen. It swoops in, grabs the electrons, grabs a few protons, and makes water. Simple as that. Without oxygen there to clean up at the end, the whole assembly line would just get clogged up and grind to a halt.
That energy from the falling electrons, it's used to pump protons across a membrane, building up a ton of pressure, like water behind a dam. And that pressure is then unleashed through this absolutely incredible molecular machine called ATP synthesis. I'm not kidding, it's a literal spinning motor. As the protons rush through, it spins, and that spinning motion is what generates just massive, massive amounts of ATP. This is the payoff. This is the jackpot.
So, after that whole incredible journey from a single sugar molecule all the way to that spinning motor, what's the final score? Let's tally up the energy we've made. And while we're at it, we're going to uncover one last kind of mind-blowing secret about this whole system.
From that one molecule of glucose, the cell, under perfect conditions, can generate a grand total of 38 ATP molecules. 38! Now compare that to the measly 2 it gets from fermentation. It's not even close. That's the power of oxygen.
And here's where it all comes from. We got a profit of 2 ATP way back at the beginning in glycolysis. We got another 2 directly from the Krebs cycle. But look at this. The overwhelming majority, a whopping 34 ATP, comes from that final amazing step with the electron transport chain and the spinning motor. That is some serious efficiency.
Okay, but here's that secret I promised. We've been talking about this whole process as a one-way street, right? Breaking stuff down. That's called catabolism. But the truth is, it's actually what's known as an amphibilock pathway. Amphi means both.
What this means is that the respiratory pathway is like the central roundabout of the cell's entire economy. It doesn't just burn things for energy. The cell can actually pull molecules out at different stages of the cycle and use them as building blocks to make other things it needs, like fats or proteins. It's a demolition site and a construction yard all at the same time.
And that really leaves us with something to chew on, doesn't it? The same exact pathway that life uses to get the most energy out of its food is also the source of the very building blocks it needs to grow. What does that tell you? It just shows this incredible elegance, this breathtaking efficiency that evolution has built into the very core of how life works. It's all connected.